Welcome to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. In this episode's main segment, Jacob Stuart, who I interviewed in episode 7, is back to talk with me about one-location, low-budget feature films. There's a good market for these scripts right now, so this is a great way to break into the business. So that's coming up. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes. I want to thank Miss Brass, Sean Speak, Renee, Devin McKay, Market Man, My Name is Crazy, for leaving me nice reviews on iTunes. I want to thank Ginger Shine, Adam Strange, Eric Joyce, Tracy Nell, Christine Pagisi, Bill Harton, Richard Hector, and Andrew Pratt, who all left me nice reviews and comments on YouTube. Thank you very much for those. I wanted to address one comment that seems to come up quite a bit if you're watching this via YouTube. You'll notice that I don't look into the camera. I'm actually reading from an outline that I prepared for the show. I'm not really very good right now at reading and looking into the camera, but I do realize this would be a much better way of doing it. Hopefully I'll get better at just glancing at my outline and actually talking into the camera as I continue to do this. To try and generate some iTunes reviews, I'm going to be giving away one free email fax blast to someone who leaves a review in iTunes from now until February 8th, 2014. I'm extending the contest because a few people seem to have problems getting their comments posted, so hopefully the extra few days will help with this. But also, I realized that I said in the last episode that I would accept entries until the end of January, but I actually record the episode a week or so early, so I'm actually recording this episode before the contest has ended, which obviously wouldn't make sense for anyone who posts a comment after the recording is done, but before the episode airs. So the contest is still up and running, so go into iTunes and enter a comment under this podcast, and you'll be eligible to win a free email fax blast. This fax email blast is the same blast that I use for my own screenplays, and it's the same blast that I sell on my blog. So just leave me an honest review on iTunes, and then during the next episode, which will come out on February 17th, I'll randomly pick one person who's left a comment on iTunes. Again, the cutoff date for the entries will be February 8th. I'll probably record that February 17th episode right around February 9th. So try and get your comments in before February 8th. And then you'll have the choice of the winner will have a choice of either a free agent manager blast or a free producer's blast. Also, I'll be picking a name from everyone who has posted a comment, including the people who have already posted. So if you've already posted a comment, you're already entered to win. You don't need to enter another comment. To be eligible, you must post your comment through the iTunes interface. I've had a number of people ask if they can post it on YouTube or some other platform, and right now I'm just specifically trying to boost my iTunes comments. So to be eligible, again, you do have to go through the iTunes interface. iTunes makes it pretty hard to dig through the comments from other countries. I'll be checking the US, UK, Australia, and Canada, but if you don't live in one of those countries, just drop me an email telling me which country you live in, so I'll remember to check the comments in that country. Thank you. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts. Also, if you want my free guide, How to Sell Your Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide, how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. It really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. I've been getting a lot of questions lately about my email and fax blast service, and a lot of the questions will be answered by joining my free email list. When you join, I send you detailed instructions about how you can actually build your own database of contacts. So you can make this work. You don't have to purchase my email or fax blast. You can build your own database, and I actually go through all the steps to do that. And I explain all the steps before and after that as well, how to write the logline and query letter. So if you're wondering what all this is about, what this fax blast and email is, just take a minute and join the email list. It really is free, and it really will explain my whole approach to marketing screenplays. A quick few words about what I'm working on. The main thing I've been working on right now is a final polish on a spec comedy screenplay. I'll hopefully be done in the next couple of weeks, and then I'll begin blasting it out to my list. I would say this script got pretty mixed reviews in my writers group. It's got some problems. I think I have a pretty memorable ending, and the ending did seem to polarize the group a bit. Some people seemed to really like it, while others thought it was too outlandish. I actually think this can be a good thing. I mean, if you have an ending that everyone is lukewarm on, that's a big problem. But at least some people seem to be surprised and delighted with the ending, so that's potentially a good thing. Last week, I finished up a very quick polish on my sci-fi thriller, which I recently optioned. It was a very light polish, just a few minor notes from the director. The option on the one-location sexy thriller script that I mentioned on this podcast is due in the next couple of days. So the producer has to either pay me some money to extend the option, or she's going to have to let it go. So it'll be interesting to see what she does. Anyway, that's about all I've got going right now. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm talking to Jacob Stuart about the limited location, low budget feature film. He's going to be running a class on this topic on February 22nd through my blog and the SYS Select program. Here is the interview. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome, Jacob, for coming back on the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate your taking some time to talk with me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. So in February, you're going to be teaching a class on the SYS Select program about writing a low-budget, one-location, limited cast feature film. Can you give us a little information on that class?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something I'm very passionate about, and we can talk more about this down the road on how I found success and why I think it's so important. But some of the bullet points that I'm definitely going to talk about that I think are some of the most important things that I get the most questions about are making sure that your script is contained and understanding what contained means, how to take your big budget script and turn it into a single location script. We're also going to talk about found footage scripts like the Blair Witch Project and how to make those work. Yep,
I see a lot of those on Inktip and stuff. There's a lot of production companies looking for those found footage type scripts.
Absolutely, and I mean, a lot of people who aren't familiar with screenwriting or film just kind of really think that the producers are just kind of coming up with this idea. I mean, no, there's actual scripts, and there's a way to write a script for that, like Paranormal Activity.
Sure.
But yeah, another thing is keeping suspense all the way to the climax, ditching the standard query letter, and learning how to pitch your script for low budget. I kind of talked about that in the short film one, ditching the whole query letter and how to sell your short script and just getting to the brass tacks of here's how many locations, here's how many actors, etc. I'm also going to talk about where to find these leads because, like you said, Inktip has a lot of them. We have a lot of those with SSU. And then how to pitch that and, like, where to find places that are – where to advertise that, like putting it up on an Inktip, for instance. I'm also going to talk about how to master dialogue in single location without giving too much away. I'm going to talk specifically about Reservoir Dogs and Tarantino and how he broke the rules of, you know, how you would write a big-budget film with 3 or 4 pages max for one scene and why his opening scene that took place in one location was 11 pages and why that worked. And then lastly, I'm going to take up, and this will probably be about 1/4 of the class, on how to produce your low-budget short, utilizing the locations and actors that you have, how to find funding, distribution companies that specifically seek this stuff, and festivals that welcome low-budget indie thrillers.
That's great. That sounds like a great class. I can't wait to listen to it myself. So let's take a minute and just talk about why it's so important to write a low-budget script and get some of these credits. One of the things I know from the people that have joined Selling Your Screenplay is there is a lot of people out there writing these big studio movies, and the competition is fierce. So your chances of actually breaking through with one of those is a lot smaller. And I don't know that people fully comprehend sort of the logistics of what it takes to sell a studio script. So you have some ideas on why this is so important?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you said it just right. A lot of people don't really understand why keeping location and actors down. This is a great way for someone who doesn't have a credit to become an option screenwriter immediately, become a produced screenwriter immediately, and get paid. Film has changed just so much in the past 5 years. I mean, just since 2000, was it 9 or 10 with the Canon 5D and 7D, where a photographer can go out and film, top quality products that look just like film, and everybody is a filmmaker now, in retrospect. So because of that, you know, a lot of people don't have a lot of money. So they have their grandma's basement, or they have their bedroom, or they have an office, and that's all they have. And they have a camera and they have a few lights. They don't have a lot of resources, so they want low budget stuff. I mean, that's why with Screenwriting Staff in Utopia, I'm constantly getting stuff saying I need a budget under $500,000. I needed $100,000. I mean, I get some that say I need it under $30,000. It needs to have 1 or 2 locations. Here are the locations I have. I don't want any more than 6 actors. But the great thing about these kind of jobs are, if they have $2,000, $4,000, $6,000 sitting there to pay for a script, they're ready to give you that. So you don't have to sit there for 2 or 3 years for this option agreement to find investors. No, it's such a low amount, they can shoot it right away. So not only are you getting paid right away, but your product's going to be so easy to shoot that you're going to get to see it, you know, on the screen in festivals, you know, within a year or so.
Yeah. The other thing is, and I include myself in this when I first started out, is there's this sort of idea that once you get your first credit, everything will just open up and you'll have made it to, you know, some sort of screenwriting, you know, nirvana. And unfortunately, it's not that easy. And what I found after selling a couple scripts was that you have to just keep working as hard. And unless you get a movie that's really either at least a modest hit or gets some sort of, you know, serious critical recognition or something, you know, you've got to just keep getting movies made to keep your career going. And I'm finding that I've written some lower budget stuff, and I'm finding that getting these things optioned is really not that difficult. As you said, there's producers out here that have, and some of these budgets are not even $100,000 or $200,000, really like the $600,000 or even the $800,000 or the $1 million. You know, there are producers out there that have that much money and they've got a business model, but they need something very, very specific that they can shoot. And $1 million sounds like a lot of money just to your average Joe, but to shoot a feature film, it's not that much money. But you just got to keep rolling the dice and keep getting material made.
I completely agree, and you made a good point about getting these scripts optioned, because even big studios don't always just option scripts so fast, because they know it's going to take so much time to find investors, and they have to hire line producers and so forth to break this down. You know, how many props, how many actors to go talk to these investors. But when a producer, an indie producer, has a script that takes place in maybe 2 or 3 locations, they're going to auction your script really fast, because they know exactly how much money they have, how much money it's going to take to make the script by just reading it. So the turnaround time is going to be so much quicker. I mean, they can go to an investor and say, "Hey, we're shooting this in a motel. That's it. That's all the money we need." So I mean, producers are more, you know, they're more into going to option a script faster than that. But no, I absolutely agree. I'm not against writing big budget films. I mean, I'm sure you have one, I have one. I mean, I wrote one that I know would probably take a good $50 to $100 million to write, and that was actually my first script to ever do. And it's okay to do that, and it's fun to do that, and you can be creative. But I think it's time for some writers who maybe do have 10 or 12 huge blockbuster films to kind of put those away for a little bit and go to something a little bit more simple, something strong. Get that option, get that sold, get your name out there, and you'll be surprised that producers might say, what else do you have? Oh, let me show you this one.
No, I agree, and I get emails, as I'm sure you do, from writers that, you know, they're diligent writers that have written 10, 15, 20 scripts, and they have no options. And I feel like a lot of times that's one of the biggest things they're missing, is just a sort of a practical idea of what actually can get out into the marketplace and actually has a chance of success. And if you've written 5 scripts and had no success, this is absolutely mandatory that you listen to what we're saying here and write something that's low budget, because if you've written that many scripts, you've probably put in the time to actually get the skill set. You probably are a halfway decent writer. You have the determination and the persistence to keep going. This is a good way to just get out there and actually get a credit and start really building a career.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, exactly. If you can write that many scripts with a strong story, you already have the basics down.
So let's take a minute and talk about some really good films. I mean, just in the last, 10 years or so, 5 years, the studios even have started to look for some of these one location scripts. And there was a very popular one called Buried. I think it was Ryan Reynolds. And I remember watching that one, and I had heard the pitch that it takes place all in this coffin. This guy gets buried in a coffin, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, it couldn't be completely in the coffin, could it? And sure enough, it's completely in the coffin. And it was at least a studio movie. I mean, it had Ryan Reynolds, and there was I think it was a remake. Colin Farrell is stuck on the phone booth, and Kiefer Sutherland. I can't remember the name of the movie now. So there is even a market for these at a pretty high level if you write a really good one. To say nothing of just the low budget ones. So let's talk about some of the other big films. You had mentioned some that you really like, and let's just take a minute to talk about those.
Yeah, some of my favorite ones are 12 Angry Men. I'm also a big fan of Breakfast Club and Rear Window. Breakfast Club, for instance, well, it's just like Barry. I didn't know anything about that movie until you just said that, and honestly, that's the best pitch I've ever seen. Just a guy is stuck in a coffin for the whole movie. I mean, I want to read that right there. But with with that, you can get a good actor because you have more budget. Same with Breakfast Club. It takes place in a classroom. There's really not a lot of action going on. It's dialogue. They've created these characters where their personalities clash. And because they had, a little extra money, they could get, named actors. The same with 12 Angry Men. I mean, it's amazing to think that you can have 12 men sit in, a jury area, and the movie lasts so long. I was just doing research before we spoke, and the movie's 96 minutes long, but only 3 minutes of that is outside of the courtroom or where they, are conjuring. So,
yeah, the jury room. Yeah. Let's dig into 12 Angry Men. I just I mentioned this to you before the interview. I've seen Breakfast Club but it's been a couple of years. I watched 12 Angry Men just the last 2 days. It's actually available for all the listeners. Here we are in February of 2014. It's currently available on YouTube. I don't think it's legal, but somebody went and just uploaded the entire film, and it's pretty decent quality. I mean, it looks like it was digitized pretty well and just uploaded. So it's free for everybody to go and watch. And I had never seen it. I had heard of it. So let's run through that one in a little bit more depth. The one thing that I was really impressed by was you have 12 men, and, for a novice writer, I think one big problem that you would run into is that all the characters sound alike and seem alike, and they did a great job really making each of the 12 men very distinct and really understanding the point of view of 12 very different people. And some of it was as simple, I would say. I mean, they gave one guy an accent, so you could kind of tell him. They dressed, there was some blue-collar guys and some white-collar guys, so, they dressed the blue-collar guys a little bit. They weren't wearing the ties. They had an old guy. So they had some sort of physical traits that kind of helped us understand these characters, but really it was the dialogue and the point of view that these characters had that made them distinct, and it wasn't just, what was that? Who's that guy? What's that guy saying? Very, very distinct characters.
That's a great point. And one of the things I was going to add too is in the movie we'll only told two people's names. So, and just like you said, you watch that movie and you know who each character is, their background, where they come from, or their personality, all of that. We don't even know their names. I mean, the writing in that is absolutely amazing. And like you said, that was one of my notes, was just each character has its own specific personality, which creates its own intensity and its own conflict. And that's what makes great movies. I mean, big blockbusters where it's in tons of locations or just one. If you have that, your film's going to be successful.
The other thing I liked about 12 Angry Men was they, despite, as you said, it all takes place basically in this jury room. And one of the great things was they were able to pull out some really dramatic moments. And there's the great moment where the Henry Fonda character pulls out. I'd just say this too, spoiler alert. If you haven't heard the movie, you probably want to watch it because there will be some spoilers in our discussion. But there's a great moment where Henry Fonda pulls out the second knife and slaps it on the table. And, they were really able to, they had that sort of, they reused that thing. Okay, let's take a vote to kind of gauge the temperature of the room, and they kept going back to that. But that really, that's kind of like your plot points and your sort of your clothesline that you're hanging the structure on. Is they kept taking a vote of how the jurors were voting, and it starts off 11-1, and then by the end it's 11-1 the other way, and that really gives your script some forward momentum, so you can tell that things are moving forward and changing. It was just a really smart use of, as I said, sort of a dramatic convention. Yeah,
I never really thought about that, and that's completely right. Yeah, I mean they did all of that. I mean there was never a dull moment in there, and they always stuck something in there that's forced to change the story. So and that's like those in a lot. I mean just like just to go to Rear Window real quick, which was a Hitchcock, and Hitchcock has done several one location movies, including Rope as well. But I mean this man's in the wheelchair, and he's out of his apartment and he spies on people, but he witnesses a murder. And when you throw something like that in a story, I mean, that right there in your log line or your synopsis when you're just pitching, it already grabs the reader or the producer or anyone. And then when you add, and it takes place in one location, I mean, they may option that before they even read it.
Yeah. I actually had a meeting last week with a producer, and I have a one location thriller that basically takes place all at a hotel. And I was just talking to them, and I could see exactly what you're saying. The producer's eyes lit up when I started to talk about this script because they knew that it would be easy to shoot, and because it's sort of a sexy thriller, there's a definite marketplace for that. Another thing, just taken back to 12 Angry Men, I just jotted down this other note, and this is a thing that new writers have a real hard time with, but 12 Angry Men did it absolutely just masterfully, is the way they laid out the exposition. There was no clunky exposition bombs. It was just slowly we got what had happened in the court case and what had happened surrounding this murder, and they just, very organically and naturally they laid out these pieces of the story and the backstory and what had happened up until that time. There was never these clunky moments like you felt like someone was just saying something just to give us some exposition. Very natural. And that's something that, again, a script like this, when you watch it, you don't necessarily notice it because it's well done. But when you read a beginner script where they give you these just exposition drops, it gets very, very clunky. So that's another thing that I would say is an important lesson from 12 Angry Men.
Absolutely. It's funny when Tarantino does films like a Reservoir Dogs, there's so much dialogue, but none of it really gives a lot away. It gives us just what we need. And if it was done poorly, we would notice, but you don't notice it. You just expect it to be good. But there is a trade to it, and you have to learn it. And that's kind of one of the things I want to do in the class. I mean, you can only teach so much with that, but there is a way to make the dialogue snappy and to keep the story moving and create conflict just like in 12 Angry Men, because they're so different, without giving the entire story away. It's like Chris Nolan always says, his films, it's like, you have the mouse in this maze, and some people shoot it where you see the mouse in all the wrong ways it goes, but you see the end. He shoots it where we are the mouse and we're experiencing it, and that's the thing that you have to do with those types of thrillers. Yeah, for sure. So, well, that's great. Are there some other things maybe we could talk about on some of the other movies, The Rear Window and Breakfast Club? Any other points you want to bring out? I think one of the things that with Breakfast Club that I enjoy the most is we don't have any dialogue in the opening. You just see these characters, and honestly, it's not so much the direction. Like, they get this script, and then the director and the cinematographer come in and change all this. And Breakfast Club is one of those ones, and I can maybe send you a link, but you can download the script and read it, and you'll notice that there is very minimal dialogue, but we know who the jock is, we know who the druggie is, we know who the bad boy is and the prom queen, simply by the cars they pull up in, the way they're dressing, the way they hold themselves, just all of that, how they sit in the chair. And if you can really see how they do that, you can get rid of some of that dialogue. So, and this is all in a one location. So it's great writing. And I think the thing that people need to realize about one location scripts is I think a lot can be credited to the director in a lot of films. But the screenwriter who can master the one or two location script should get a big portion of that credit. I mean, yes, the director has to choose certain camera angles, and there's a different way of shooting that. But I think those kind of films, I think it's great to read the script as well, and you have a much more of appreciation on how hard it is, but how to master it at the same time.
Yeah, well, I'll find the script. We'll definitely link to the I'll see if I can find the 12 Angry Men script and the Rear Window script as well, and see if we can link to those.
Definitely. Now, I haven't seen the newer 12 Angry Men, so I don't know much reference on that, but the first one, I think that's the one I would recommend as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the one that I watched. As I said, it was on YouTube. So, well, that's great, Jacob. It does sound like a really interesting class. As I said, I'm looking forward to it. So hopefully some of our users will sign up and look forward to it as well.
Great.
Perfect. So thanks again for coming on, and we'll talk to you in February.
All right.
If you'd like to learn more about the class that Jacob is going to be teaching, go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/classes. Again, it's going to be on February 22nd. It's a Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. In this week's Writing Words section, I want to expand on some of the things that Jacob talked about today. There is a ton of advice out there for the beginning screenwriter, and it's basically pretty simple. When you're first starting out, you need to write a bunch of scripts and read a ton of screenplays, and you probably don't need to worry about too much else. Most of these early attempts aren't going to be all that great, which is fine. My first screenplays were terrible. So you've got to just get through those early stages and get to the point where you're actually able to write something that someone wants to buy. I don't know that there is really any trick to it. You just need to put your head down and do the work. I feel like most of the people who join my site, read my blog, and listen to this podcast are probably past those beginning stages. So today I want to talk a bit about how to go from that stage where you've written more than a few screenplays but still don't have any produced credits. I think there are a ton of people in this situation, and I actually think there is not a lot of good advice out there for them. A lot of the advice that you see from established writers goes something along the lines of just write a great script. That was never very helpful to me. First, I'm not sure I've ever really written a great script, but mainly it seems like advice from someone who doesn't really understand how or why they succeeded. I feel like most of the people who give out that sort of advice have either been very lucky or they're simply super talented or some combination of the two. But in either case, I'm not sure there's a lot we can learn from them. I heard Tim Ferriss on a podcast a while back. He's the author of The 4-Hour Work Week, The 4-Hour Body, and The 4-Hour Chef. If you've never heard of Tim Ferriss, one of his main focuses is how to learn a skill super fast. And one of the things he was talking about on this podcast was the idea that if you want to get really good at something, you shouldn't look at the people at the very top of the profession, because they most likely have a lot of God-given talents that you and I simply don't have. So think about this just for a second. This makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you want to learn how to play golf, looking at Tiger Woods probably isn't going to help you much with your game. He can do things with his body that you and I simply don't have the physical gifts to do. So Tim's point was, you want to try and emulate someone further down in the rankings, looking for a guy who doesn't have a ton of physical talents or God-given gifts, and try and learn from him. So back to screenwriting. I don't know that anyone out there has a real actionable template for succeeding at screenwriting for this intermediate level, and that's really what I'm trying to provide here. So let's talk about some real actionable things intermediate writers can do. There are three main problems that I see with intermediate writers. Number one, and I've talked about this a ton on my podcast and written about it on my blog, but too many intermediate writers fail to understand the markets and what they actually have a chance at selling. Number two, many intermediate writers simply aren't putting in the time and writing enough material to give themselves a real chance. And number three, a lot of writers that I talk to, they're just not aggressively marketing their material. A lot of writers, they get to that stage, that intermediate stage, where they've maybe had some success, maybe they've won a contest or received some other recognition and have been able to land an agent and manager, but then they rely solely on their agent and manager to market their material. Putting your future in someone else's hands is a recipe for working your day job for a very, very long time. So let's talk about the first problem a bit, failing to understand what you can realistically sell. That's what Jacob's class is all about. These limited location feature screenplays are relatively easy to sell. There are people out there looking for them, and if you have a good one, you will get it optioned. And if you have enough of them, one of them will eventually get produced. The marketing is fairly straightforward. You can find these leads posted on Craigslist, Inktip. Use a blasting service, email and fax blast service like mine. So again, this is a very realistic way of actually becoming a professional writer with real credits. These budgets are usually pretty modest, but they usually have a budget, and you will get paid and you will get a credit, and all of a sudden you'll go from being an intermediate writer to an actual optioned and produced professional screenwriter. My very first Selling Your Screenplay class, Select class, was all about choosing your concept. It's available for replay if you join SYS Select. Selling a studio level screenplay, and I kind of mentioned this in the interview with Jacob, selling a studio level screenplay is just really, really hard. I mean, there's a ton of people trying to do it. Your screenplay has to be really good, and you've got to get really lucky to sell one. And it does happen for outsiders, just, long shots can come in. And so you do hear of these things. So it is possible, but it's a whole lot easier to sell one of these low budget feature film scripts. It doesn't have to be great. It's just got to be good. It's got to meet certain, criteria. And a lot of the criteria isn't necessarily great writing. It's, one location that the director has access to. It's, a role for a specific actor that this director wants to cast in their movie. So I really, really would advise you to take a step back. If you're one of these intermediate writers, you've written a bunch of scripts, take a step back and really examine your concepts and really examine your marketing. So now let's talk a bit about the second problem that I mentioned, and not writing enough material to give yourself a chance at succeeding. Selling any screenplay is a long shot, so you've got to get enough volume, which means option screenplays, to turn one of those options into an actual sale. Let's just say you need to option 5 screenplays to get one produced credit. Then that means if you can get 10 options, your chances of actually getting a produced credit are pretty good. Now, let's look at what I've done over the last year. In the last 12 months, I've optioned 4 scripts. One of the options has essentially lapsed. The producer was supposed to pay me an additional option payment in October, and he didn't want to pay it. He's a nice guy, and I think he'll do a good job with the script, but honestly, I'm not all that convinced that he's going to make it happen. But the bottom line is the script is sort of still tied up. I'm not sending it out widely because I do like this director and producer, and I do think that they have a shot. So that's one of my scripts. It's just tied up. It's not really optioned, but it is sort of tied up. One of my other options, the producer has to make an option payment the next few days. I mentioned this in the what I'm working on section, and I would put this maybe at like a 50-50 chance whether or not she's actually going to make that payment. So, with only a 50-50 chance of her actually extending the option, I don't think there's a real good chance that she's actually going to produce this movie. Maybe she's a producer. She's got some credit. So I'm hopeful, but realistically, I'm not counting on it. One of the other options that I have, the producer emailed me the other day, and he said he's having a hard time raising the money, and he's trying to go through the script and figure out how to shoot it a lot cheaper. So that one I optioned maybe 5 or 6 months ago, and he had a year-long option. So he's got a few more months, but again, I'm hopeful, but I'm certainly not counting on it. And then the last option, I mentioned my sci-fi thriller, which I talked about on the last podcast episode. I still have high hopes for it, but the option just started, so it's really hard to tell how that one will turn out. My point in going through all of this is just to kind of show you that it takes a lot of option screenplays to actually get one into production. And once a screenplay is optioned, it's off the market and tied up. So you've got to have a bunch of well-written screenplays that you're out there marketing. You've got to be writing new stuff all the time. So if you just have 2 or 3 good screenplays, I just don't think that's really going to be enough to actually push you through to the next level. I mean, who knows? You might get lucky. I hope you do, but it's just going to be very, very tough with only 2 or 3 screenplays. Once you option those 2 or 3 screenplays, I mean, they're tied up, as I just sort of explained with my scripts. Even if the options are not that high paying, they can be tied up for a year, 2 years, and you're just waiting. And there's not a great probability that any one of those is going to come through. If you're constantly writing new material, then you've got this whole sort of cycle of getting more stuff options. And as I said, I mean, if I can have 10 scripts optioned at one time, I'll start to feel pretty good about my chances. I'll start to feel like, hey, that's a good it's a pretty good chance. And that, to have 10 scripts optioned, I mean, you've probably got written 15 scripts, because you're always going to have some that are duds that don't quite hit the market right. And that's one of the things that I see with a lot of these intermediate writers. They get to a certain point where they've written 2 or 3 scripts, and they kind of just don't really keep the pedal on the floor. They don't keep pushing ahead, and they don't keep writing new material. So that's the second problem. So now let's talk about the third problem. And this is not aggressively marketing your screenplays. As I said, I've talked with many writers who rely on their agent and manager send out the material. In an ideal world, we as writers would be able to just sit around and write all day and let someone else worry about the marketing. But that's just not a reality unless you make it to the very, very top of the profession. No one is going to care about your work like you do, and no one is going to market your work as aggressively as it needs to be marketed. Agents and managers are just people. There's really nothing that they can do that you yourself can't do. I mean, some of them hopefully have been in the business for a long time, so they have some contacts that you may not have, but you should be building your own network of contacts. And just think about this from the agent's perspective. I mean, if you were one person that was representing 10 or 15 or 20 writers, how much of your time is going to be spent on any one writer? If you have 20 writers, 5% at most. Maybe you'll have some really good writers that are bringing in most of your money, so you shift most of your time to trying to get those out there. But as an intermediate writer who's got an agent, you're probably not that guy. You're not the one bringing in the money, so you're not going to get a lot of attention. Even if you have an agent, they'll send your stuff out. They'll do some stuff to just see if they can, strike lightning, and if they do, great. They'll ride that, but no one is going to care about you. And you have, even if you spend, 50% of your time writing and 50% of your time marketing, that's going to be a lot more time marketing than your agent is most likely going to spend on you. So, and then there's the writer who doesn't have an agent, and all they've done is entered a few contests or tried 1 or 2 online services, and they think that's enough. It's simply not enough. And I don't want this to seem just like it's me shilling my own email and fax blast service. Again, in my free guide, I explain how you can build your own database if you don't want to spend money on the service. You can do it for very little money, next to no money. Really, you can build your own database and send out emails for free. For the last few scripts that I've marketed for myself, I've also used other online services. There are really many at this point. I still look through Craigslist regularly. As I said, the last couple scripts that I've finished, I've put them on Inktip. I've entered them. I've uploaded them to the new Blacklist service. And I even have been recently, the last couple times, I've tried a service called Virtual Pitch Fest. So I would also add contests to this mix. Many contests specifically exclude writers who have made money as a screenwriter, so it's not something that I do any longer. But if you meet the contest requirements, I do think this is another thing you can be doing to try and move your career ahead. The other thing is, marketing is not some secret magical sauce. I mean, a lot of good marketing is just covering your bases and being persistent. It's nothing more than being diligent. Just do everything you can think of and see what works. The good news is that in this day and age, it really is just a matter of spending a few bucks, and you can get your script out there pretty easily. It's not just through my service, but through any of the other services that I've talked to. And the services that I mentioned on here, Inktip, the Blacklist, Virtual Pitch Fest, I mean, those are fairly well regarded in the industry. So they're not scams. They're not, they may or may not work for you, but they're certainly not scams. So you're not going to be just totally wasting your money with them. I really believe if you have leaks in any of these 3 areas and you plug those leaks, you'll start to option and sell some stuff. Really, virtually everyone I talk to who is in this intermediate stage has some mix of these 3 problems. I get emails from people all the time who have written 10, 20. I even got an email from a guy who had written 30 plus screenplays and never sold anything. I would say someone like that clearly doesn't have a problem with writing enough material. He's certainly writing enough, but he's got to have 1 or 2 of the other problems. Either he's writing scripts that aren't marketable, or he's not being aggressive enough on the marketing front. I mean, there's really only those 2 possibilities. I talked with another writer recently who had a manager, and 1 or 2 scripts the manager liked, but the writer wasn't really pumping out new stuff, nor was she trying to market it herself. And this writer is very talented, and she's an excellent writer, but she doesn't have any credits. And I really believe it's because she's not producing enough scripts, and she's not doing anything to market her scripts herself. She's just relying solely on her manager. The bottom line is that if you're having trouble getting to the point where you have a few things optioned, you need to really just take a step back and try and look at yourself realistically and honestly. Look at yourself and try and figure out where you fit in these three problems. I suppose there is a fourth possible option, and that is that your scripts are simply not very good. But I honestly don't think that's the problem for most of the people that I talk to. If someone has taken the time to write, 5, 10, 15 scripts, they usually get at least halfway decent at it, even if they're not the most talented writer in the world. And as I said, a lot of these low budget scripts where you're just trying to break into the market, these one location feature film scripts, they don't have to be great. They don't have to be the greatest script ever written. They just have to be competent. One other possibility might be that you're not really through the beginning stage and your scripts aren't up to professional levels. You've got to be brutally honest with yourself. I would say if you're listening to this wondering if your scripts are on a professional level, it means that they aren't. To be at the professional level, you will need to be good enough to recognize a professional level script when you see it. So if you can't tell if your scripts are at that level or not, it means they're probably not. One other thing that I would like to point out is that this strategy isn't any different than what I'm doing, and I've sold a few scripts and earned a sizable percent of my income from screenwriting. Quite often, I'll talk to a writer who's had some significant success in the business. They've sold a studio-level film, but they're struggling now, and I'm always amazed at how little they understand about the marketing of their scripts. A lot of time, they'll be bowled over when I tell them how many scripts I've sold, and all without an agent or manager. So this strategy is really for everyone except beginners and the few people at the highest levels. Everybody in between, intermediate, and I would consider myself well past the intermediate, professional screenwriter. It's really everybody in that range. The beginner, if you're a beginner, you need to take some time and really just get the fundamentals down. If you're at the highest level of the screenwriting profession, your agent and your manager and your network of contacts, really those are the people that you're going to, and that's how you're getting your work. But everybody that's not working, writing as much as they want, everybody who's trying to break in, written a bunch of scripts, I really think this is the strategy, is just getting out there and looking at yourself and plugging those leaks. One other final point I want to make. This isn't just about blindly following my advice. You've got to get out there and see what works for you and push in that direction. There is a lot of subtlety and nuance to this whole process that can only really be figured out by actually getting in there and doing it. I mean, this is a kind of a hard thing to describe, but there's really nothing like talking to a producer and, asking them what they're working on and why they're working on the projects they're working on. And, you start to understand sort of the practical aspects of screenwriting. And it's, as I said, it's a real subtlety and a nuance actually hearing it from a working producer's perspective. And, it can really help you navigate your own writing. And there's a limit to what I or anybody else can tell you, because everything that I hear from a producer is filtered through me. And, that might not quite work for you. But if you're out there and you're networking and you're talking to producers, and then though their words are going through you, you can start to figure out, well, I'm good at this, or, people seem to really like this part of my writing and I can maybe push in that direction. So it's just not about, some sort of a blind checklist and okay, we've got 3 problems and I'm plugging this problem and this problem. It's really about getting out there and doing it and talking to people. So anyways, that's our episode. I hope you found it useful. I really do appreciate your listening, and tune in next time. As I said, the next episode will be coming out February 17th. Thanks, and talk to you later.